a child is struggling in school, not just with grades, but with motivation, meltdowns, and focus, emotional dysregulation and trauma may be affecting their ability to learn. So let's talk about what happens in a dysregulated brain and for somebody who has trauma. So when somebody is activated, their amygdala dysregulates. It moves into a hyper state where they are hyper vigilant, they're looking for threats, and that creates a cascade of both neurotransmitters and cortisol that help the brain to try to find this threat, right? And when somebody has experienced trauma, their nervous system is always activated into a sympathetic dominant fight, flight, freeze, fawn state. And the prefrontal cortex goes offline so that they can take action. And it creates really like a warrior state when there doesn't need to be. And that's because that nervous system is just feeding it. And when it comes to learning, it also is going to impact their memory, their executive functioning. They're not going to be able to take action, see future projects, and see it as an end result because they're so activated in the present. So you'll see impulsivity, poor planning, and then their sensory system is overwhelmed on top of it. So you have a hot mess in the nervous system. And how does this show up in the classroom? So each child is unique, but we do see some patterns that emerge with kids that have trauma and how does it impact their learning. So you might see task avoidance, particularly with challenging tasks. So it can look like refusal. These kids get labeled as unmotivated and lazy. And again, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn is showing up. There might be more meltdowns, shutdowns, especially during transitions. Because remember, every time we transition, it's saying, I'm not safe right now to the nervous system. So that nervous system goes into an activated state, protecting itself in a warrior state, right? You might see explosive, disruptive behavior, particularly during group work, because again, it's cueing, I'm not safe, I'm in a group. And with some of these perfectionist tendencies that might be there, or just a perceived threat within the nervous system, right? You might see either low movement, right? So I'm so tired, head down, or you might see constant movement, fidgeting. Those extremes are often there. What you're not seeing typically is somebody who's alert, present, ready to learn, right? And you certainly will see trouble focusing because, again, the nervous system is so activated. So that focus, retention, following multi step instructions is going to be harder. And executive functioning, sensory issues are showing up. And what you may see is a pattern of disciplinary actions for kids that have experienced trauma. And remember, trauma, if you watch the other episode, can be big T's, it can be little T's. There are a lot of different types of trauma, and it's your nervous system that decides how that body's going to hold the trauma. And the more traumas a person has had, the more likely each trauma is going to stick and cause this disruption to a child in their daily functionings, including being a student, right? Just know that a dysregulated child can't learn, not because they don't want to, is because their brain is still trying to survive. And you're asking a warrior to sit down. Hey, sit down. There's a war going on. Let's do this homework about the War of 1812. No, that's just not how it works. Your nervous system needs to be regulated first. So, why do traditional academic supports often fail for kids with trauma? So, we often focus on compliance and getting them to finish the work, do the work instead of regulation. I had a meeting this week for somebody that has multiple traumas, including medical trauma, including bullying trauma, and great team of people wanting to really get this kid to move faster. And I just reminded them that the nervous system is activated in a way that they don't feel safe. And we have to let the nervous system heal before we can move them in a trajectory, meaning quote unquote, finish the schoolwork into and in a way that gets this person the grades or the credits that they need. And so it was helpful for them to hear that because the parent wasn't expecting that, but the school is always so worried about, compliance to doing that schoolwork, right? Another reason why um, what we put in place in schools don't work is because rewards and consequences don't build emotional regulation skills, right? We have to teach this student how to regulate, right? And it's complex. There's no one solution. It requires a safe environment. It requires a teacher co-regulating. It requires direct instruction, not just at school, but at home, so that there's that constant repetition so the nervous system feels safe. And that's a lot. IEPs and 504s, they're great, but often they don't focus on nervous system regulation, executive functioning, creating calm, safe environments, and skill set teaching, right? Because again, we need layers in here so that the student feels that they are safe. Their nervous system feels. It's not like, hey, do you feel safe? Yes. No. What is the nervous system showing us? If the nervous system is showing us that this brain believes it's safe, you're going to see increases in positive learning behaviors, right? So, what actually helps, right? Regulation before instruction. That should just be a standard of learning for all students, movement breaks, calm corners embedded in this child's day, right? This isn't just a reaction. This is really creating safe, predictable routines that incorporate calm down corners and regulation as just part of that instruction, right? We need collaborative, trauma informed teams. And I think for those people that are working with in schools with students where there's hundreds of traumatized students, I know my one of my mentors, Dr. Mary J. Sabo, she worked in the 90s in Yonkers, New York with crack addicted babies. And everybody was traumatized and they went in and they did neurofeedback and there was all this research and just unbelievable changes in these traumatized kids, developmental trauma. Unfortunately, their research ended with September 11th because all the funding got switched. I mean, and as it should. But it was incredible to see what could happen when we create a whole culture of change and teaching people about trauma and regulation, finding a tool for it. But even in the most extreme cases, we know that when you focus on how regulating that nervous system, we can create change, right? And that homeschool connection is important because when we have traumatized families, they don't know differently. But when we know better, we can do better. And so that's why we're having these conversations. That's why I have my comms certification coming for schools and organizations so that we can simplify it, we can make it digestible for kids, for families, and for boots on the ground, for sure. So just know that emotional dysregulation, whatever the source is just one of the most common barriers to learning for kids, and we have to have a cultural shift. If you are looking for direct support, you can go to drroseann.com/quickcom. And this is an unbelievable tool. In 7 days, you can see differences in how your child regulates. And I designed it to be simple and easy for even the most overwhelmed families. And, I know how hard it is, whatever side you're an educator or a parent. And I hope this conversation is leaving you feeling inspired and hopeful for change, because I really do believe regulation is the path, and we need to have this message shared times 100. So make sure you take this episode, you share with a friend, you share with a colleague, or any episode that really resonates with you. And it just takes one step, and making sure you're doing these things on the regular to create the change.
Want more insights and solutions? Well, subscribe to our Dysregulation Insider, and it will show up in your inbox every week.